The year is 2012. I'm 8 years old and I am beginning to write an immaculate short story for a school assignment. The end result will be one that tops any modern writing and is no doubt the best story ever written. I have no doubt if I were to have released this short story after I made it, all the world problems would have been solved and world peace would have been achieved. So, what exactly is this short story about, and why was it never released? Well, the story, it's called The Flaming Sword of Awesomeness, and it's about how three friends triumph over adversity in order to obtain the secret sword. As for why I never released it, well, because I was 8 and I guess no one else had the vision to. Before I start unloading the perfection of a story that I wrote, I want to give some background to the story, of course, so it's not, just going in blind, So, as I said earlier, the story is about three friends who overcome trials and tribulations in order to get the awesome sword, right? This was a short story I had to write in 3rd grade for an assignment. I don't know what grade I got it, but during that time, I'm pretty sure I was really to the idea of like medieval stuff and just the idea of a group of friends doing anything, really. So that's pretty much the inspiration of the story. Also, I want to explain how I'm going to be formatting the video because I'm going to go chapter by chapter. They're not like actual chapters because I read this when I was like 9 or 8 or whatever. So they're just like paragraphs, but I called them chapters because, it's like a book when I was writing it. But either way, so after I read the chapters, I'll give a short summary in case the way I wrote it when I was, 8 was not good. And after that, I'll give some context to, that's relevant to the chapter, and then I'll move on to the next chapter. Alright, so now that I've cleared up some things, let's unpack possibly the best story to ever grace this planet. Chapter 1. Mean. Once upon a time, there were three friends named Bob, Steve, and Phil, and their parents are dead, so their brothers are in charge of them, and they are unfair and make them sleep outside even in the winter, and they made them do chores all day long, and they lesson, and if they don't, they go to time out, and they are 10 years old. So basically, this gives the tragic backstory of our main characters, Bob, Steve, and Phil. Their parents are dead, so their brothers are in charge of them, and they are mean to them by making them sleep outside and do chores all day long. They listen to the brothers, but if they don't listen, then they get put in timeout, and they're all 10 years old. Right, this paragraph is pretty straightforward. I introduced the characters and gave them a backstory. Pretty boring, but pretty amazing as well, because it's a pretty good chapter. Okay, next chapter. Let's go. Chapter 2. Sneak Out. Bob, Steve, and Phil thought about how mean their brothers are, so they decided to sneak out. They shut out the neat night, but they weren't just sneaking out for the heck of it. They were sneaking out for the Flaming Sword of Awesomeness. This pretty much says that Bob, Steve, and Phil got fed up with their brothers being so mean that they decided to sneak out. They weren't just sneaking out for no reason though. They were sneaking out to get the Flaming Sword of Awesomeness, right? Title drop. Okay? Not much context here, just an epic setup for the rest of the story. On to the next chapter. Chapter 3. The Woods. The first place they had to go is the woods. It seemed like no problem, but they had to find out, so they went into the woods. At first, it was not so bad. They got Woraz and Woraz. But then it got better and they made it to the next place they had to go. It is the Wizard Tower, Wizard's Castle. An exquisite chapter here. The gang go through the woods, which at first seemed like no big problem. However, as they progressed, the woods got worse and worse, but they eventually did get through the woods. Then there's a setup for later in the story where they have to go to the Wizard's Castle next. Some context I would like to give about this chapter is what made the woods get worse and worse, right? Of course, everyone's wondering this. How did it get worse and worse? Well, it was carbon monoxide poisoning. They were pretty much in the exhaust pipe of a car, practically husks as they left the woods, but they survived, so yeah. Next chapter. Chapter 4. Getting weapon from the king to fight. But before they went, they needed training in weapons, so they went to the king. The other option was the ninja's monastery, but the castle was closer, and they learned how to work a sword and fight. How peculiar. Our posse was poised to take on the wizard's castle, but they had no fighting experience. In order to get the proper training to be able to take on the wizard's castle, they went to the king so they could be trained in sword fighting. It is mentioned, however, that the other option they could have gone was the ninja's monastery, but they decided against it due to the proximity of the structure. The context here is basically, I need action, and this is like a training montage. The reference to a ninja's monastery is probably referring to Ninjago, which I watched a lot as a kid. So far, the story is looking intriguing. I can't wait to see what happens in the Wizard's Tower. Next chapter it is then. Well, let's go. Chapter 5. Entering the very dark energy. Okay, so before I read this chapter, I want to say that from here on out, there will be some very dark energy, right? So don't continue watching if you can't handle the dark energy. Okay, now I'm gonna read the story. Then they went to the wizard's castle. They weren't noticed at first, but then Bob dropped his sword. All the skeletons came after them. Then they killed all of them, then ran out before the wizard could catch them. This chapter is a real zinger. You see, the wizard's castle was hyped up for a few chapters, so it seemed like there would be a bunch of action. However, they sneak through the castle and are only caught by the clumsiness of Bob. Even with this gaffe, they still manage to win and don't even have to face the wizard. I did this because I needed to keep the readers on their heels. Every creaking second you read the chapter, you are left on your toes. A true masterful chapter, and not much context to give as it is written so well. Next chapter. Chapter 6. The Very Hard Video Game. The next place they went was a video game. They were all excited. They went in. They thought it was going to be a piece of cake, and the video game was called Awesome. They were halfway to the middle. Astounding. This chapter is an exquisite one for sure. Bob and his lackeys go to the next place on their quest for the Flaming Sword of Awesomeness, which is a video game. They're all clearly gamers, so they're all excited for the video game. They thought the game would be very easy. The game was called Awesome, which is awesome. And they got a fourth of the way through the game with no context given as to how or what they did. The context I can give for this chapter is that this is a reference to video games. Next chapter. Chapter 7. Getting to the middle. They were going to the middle, then bad guys came. They were big and hairy. They knew it was time to fight. They all fought. They won, but then a big monster came out of the ground. They tried to kill it, but there was no uas. But then they hit its eye and it was dead. Pretty much what happens here is that Phil and his cronies are moving along when they come across bad guys who are big and hairy. They fought them and won, but then there were more that just kept coming and kept getting bigger and bigger. They were unable to kill these monsters, but then they just killed them by hitting their eyes. The context I'm giving here is that they kill Monstar. Next chapter, let's go. Chapter 8, Middle to End. Then they had one more half to go. They fought more big bad guys and monsters, and every time they got bigger and bigger. They fought one so big they had to boost Bob up. Then it got so big and no one could get boosted up. So they just throw their swords. They beat the game! Exclamation point times 4. Wow! Steve and his gaggle of friends only had one more half of the game left until they won. They kept killing the monsters until they got so big they all had to boost Bob up and hit its eye to kill the monster. However, a problem arose when one monster was too big and Bob couldn't reach with a boost. This caused them to just throw their swords in the monster's eye, and that just killed it, because why wouldn't there be a better solution to the problem? Context is that Bob jumps high, he plays basketball. Next chapter. Chapter 9, The Forest. Then they went into the forest. It was not like the woods, it was Woas. It had flying tree people that were bad and could get you from above the ground. But they didn't notice they were halfway through. The crew went into the forest, which was worse than the woods because it had flying tree people. However, these flying tree people, who were bad, did not notice them, and they just ended up getting through. The forest didn't have carbon monoxide, but it did have high amounts of pure uranium and caused all of the crew to get leukemia. They are going through chemo right now and stuff. Okay, yeah, time for the final chapter. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Chapter 10, Getting the Sword. Then they were at the get place the sword. Then Phil tried to pull it, it shocked him. Then Steve tried, he got shocked. Then Bob tried, it worked. The end. What an inspirational end to a great story. You see, they got to the sword, but not just anyone could take the sword. Only the chosen one, or something I guess, could take the sword. The two cringe nerds of the group, Steve and Phil, try first, and they get shocked because the chosen one is a based Chad, and if you know, based and Chad is the complete opposite of cringe nerd, right? Which is what Bob is. Bob, he pulls the sword, and it of course comes out because he is a based Chad. And then the story ends. The context I'll give is that after getting the sword, Bob went straight to New Jersey and ended up using the sword in all of its flaming awesomeness to eviscerate the state. Bob was seen as a hero for doing this, and yeah. As the chapter is clearly the best in the entire story, I decided to do a little animation of this iconic moment in the greatest story since the Iliad. Let's see it right here.
Yeah, Steve, Phil, Bob, looking at the car. Look, Steve's here. I'm going to get the sword. Explosion. He's gone. Oh no, Phil, go get the sword. Look at Bob. I was going to get the sword. Look at his muscles. Oh, you look at the sword. Oh, I got it. He's got the sword. Look, he's got it. No. Yeah, I got the sword. Ooh, yeah. Ooh. Let's go, let's go. Ooh, ooh. With the sword. Wow. Wow, inspirational. Look at him. What a great story. Let's go, Bob. Epic. Let's go. Good story. Epic. Let's go.
Now that you guys know my immaculate story from 3rd grade, I hope you can see how inspirational it is, and hopefully you are all inspired and can also do great things as I did with this astronomical story. Holy cow, I'm in awe at how good that story was. Oh my god, I'm gonna epically read it 100 more times so I can remember when I was at my peak. If you want to be me, if you want me to share more inspirational stories, then subscribe and stuff. Holy cow, I'm gonna submit this story to the Nobel Prizes or something. Oh my god.